introduce
I
her.
am very honored to get to introduce Laney today. This is Laney. I'm gonna say it wrong. Linseason. But our author name goes by Leighanne. So it's great to have her here today. She's one of our softball players. She's from Longview, Texas, and she lost her father when she was 17 years old and a junior in high school. And poetry and her writing became a coping mechanism, and her book is wonderful. I've read it, and it's very inspiring, but it takes you through different stages of grief and what she is on the other side of that. So it is a great privilege to have her here today and to introduce her. So I'll hand her book back over to her. And also I want to mention that she was featured in the Pulse on February 28th. So if you've not seen the article in the Pulse, I encourage you to also get that and read a little bit more about her and her story. So, all right, please.
Do you want us to do the poetry thing?
I almost actually, this is not formal. I almost showed up in like sweatpants. So, okay, as you know, I'm Laney, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my story. And my father passed away. I was a junior in high school, and I think my biggest thing was that I was like angry. If you've read my book, you would see, like, just skipping into here, like, the book is a progression, and throughout the progression, you just see the anger, you see how upset I am just overall about, like, what happened. My dad and I, we were really close when I was younger. He was my softball coach. I associated a lot of things with him, and I genuinely feel the beginning of the grieving stages, I was pretty mad because he just wasn't there. And that's when I started writing poetry. I'm gonna let y'all come in for a second.
Thank you guys.
But I started writing poetry kind of just as a way to understand what I was feeling overall. And because I couldn't decipher it, I'll let y'all see it. I'm sorry, I have ADHD, but I started writing poetry as a way to, I guess, understand myself a little more. And it's not as like a, once upon a time, so-and-so did this or that, and it's not like too descriptive. It's kind of more or less in like a conversational tone. And I just started writing it because I couldn't comprehend my own emotions. And that's kind of where this all came out. Because later on, healing process, it's a time thing. You don't know how you're going to be in 6 months. You don't. And in the very first few months, I didn't know if I was going to be there in 6 months. So it was really hard. And like in this book, there's the poem Stairwell. And right after Stairwell, there's even a message to the reader. And it's talking about suicide. And I just want to say, if anyone has lost anybody, it's not an option, man. Suicide, like, you just got to really realize that there's more to life. And going into more about poetry, poetry and the words and the emotions, they all tell a story, but the format tells the biggest story. Because how you read things, how you say it in your head, the format helps. Stairwell, for example, this one, it's in a letter format. And when I wrote Stairwell, this is really sad, but when I wrote Stairwell, it was going to be a part of my last letter. It was my last note. And that's kind of how I wanted to portray it to readers who would read this book. But I'm going to read you guys one of my sadder poems and then one of my happier poems after the turning point. Because this book is all about, again, progression into healing, into the grieving process, into understanding your emotions. And I have to find it because so it's my first book ever in my life. I never thought I'd do this, and I forgot page numbers. So there's page numbers in table of contents, but there's none in the book. Just know 18 is there in thought. Let's see. Yeah, this is my failure right here. Okay. So the poem is Unsaid, and it kind of goes over the wish that I would have said I love you to my dad one more time. My dad passed away an hour before I got to the hospital, and I live in East Texas, and he was all in Houston area. My dad was homeless. He was a drug addict, and he died of like multi-organ failure because he used dirty needles. and it just, all the bacteria just got all over his body, and he couldn't make it. And we drove 4.5 hours to get to the hospital, and no phone calls, dead silent car. We got there and he was already gone. He had kidney failure? Sorry, this is so insensitive that I don't know what turns you yellow, but he was yellow. And I wrote this poem because, again, I never got to say my last words. And, okay, I'm gonna read it to you. I'm gonna stop talking. I am stuck in the words I will never be able to say to you. The silence between the wind and the rustle of the trees, this is where I cannot move. I'm twirling in the breeze, just a dead leaf, spinning till I hit the ground. Only being able to hope the wind takes me again and spins me around. Stuck between the gravity of my earth and the force of the wind it's birthed, the planets watch from afar as I'm taken to where I'd restart. This will never be fair, for I can only grow to die, never be more than a leaf floating through the sky. Stuck between the words I will never say to you, between the I and the L, I'm the space that's sometimes there. For others tend to lead the I love you, all but bare. I acted like I never cared, for you were never there. You didn't deserve the love I gave, leaving my own heart surrounded by empty air. The cracks naturally made in a rock, those who collect never to pick, for the rocks are pretty but they've got a nick. The crack within holds the emptiness of its end, later to be turned to dust, the cracks leaving it open to the world, unable to defend. Stuck between the words I cannot say, if you were here I'd still stray away, for I know exactly why I felt such way, still I wish for amends to be replaced. I'll forever be stuck in the words that I could never fully let out of my mouth, for you never became a deserving man to the daughter you didn't watch sprout. So again, that one I was very upset with my dad. Overall, I was. I wanted to make amends, and I was just still angry. Even whenever he was alive, I was still mad. But overall, like, that kind of just conveys a lot of the regret I'd have. And I think my biggest message in this book is, yes, the grieving process, but the underlying one is to your loved ones, whenever they drive, your parents, whenever you're leaving, even if you're just going to the store and coming back, you don't know. You know what I mean? You don't know if you'll come back. And I think the biggest thing I'll tell people is to always tell someone you love them. It's one of the most important things that you can say to somebody. Even whenever you don't love them in that moment, like, you know, it's even a friend thing. Like, I leave Char's office sometimes, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, dang it, I should have said it. But, like, it's Char. Like, she checks my GPA. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, I love Char, though. Like, anyone's like, how's Char? I'm like, dude, I love Char, man. I'm like, 3.2, man. She told me. That's why I love her. Like, you know? And it's just the small things that people forget about once someone's gone. And sorry, I'm nervous. But skipping to a more happy one, the very last poem in the book, it's called Daughterly. And again, this is after the turning point in the book. Throughout the book, you see anger, denial, and you see everything in just random order. And once you hit the turning point, that's calloused. And for me, I found my faith in God. But for everyone, it's got to be different. Everyone, it's going to be different. And sometimes people can just simply find a group of friends. Sometimes people can just find a hobby. Like, this was my hobby. Don't know how. I never thought I would do that. But, you know what I mean? Everyone finds it in a different way. And after that turning point, you see this big change in the book to where I'm, okay, it happened. And that's okay. Because all I can do at that point is accept that it happened. Like, I can't change it. I can't go back, call my dad, hey, I love you, by the way. Like, I can't do that. So the acceptance comes with grief, and it comes with the depression, it comes with the sadness. And this really is portrayed in the last poem, Daughterly. And here, I'll read that to you. In another universe, I'm not my father's daughter. I'm his childhood friend he reminisces on as his first friendship never faltered. We'd play in the trees, I'd trip and scrape my knees, he'd help me up only for him to fall into the leaves. We'd giggle and laugh like the kids we'd be. I'd have a better memory of him and me. Maybe whoever my parents would be would teach me lessons I could tell him, lessons that would have shaped him to be a dad to me. We'd play in the rivers, water splashing in our eyes. He'd wipe his, I'd wipe mine. Bugs would bite and I'd probably cry. Maybe he'd have known how to comfort his daughter at night. Maybe he'd get mad that I rode his bike. Maybe he'd yell and scream through the daylight. I'd calm him down and show him how to not hit others. Then maybe he'd know how to control his anger toward his daughter's mother. When someone told him to try the cigarette on the ground, I could be there to say they're addictive and that shouldn't be around. He would have never become an addict. He would have never not been a father to his daughter. No lies to hide that'd make him sick. In another universe, I wouldn't have been so sad. I would have had an amazing dad. I would have never learned the lessons I have, and I would have been so free, never trapped. To the idea of never having my best friend, my dad. In another universe, he'd be alive. He'd look at me and smile, telling me to strive. My dad would be a man, not an addict trying to be high. I would have had my dad in another world. I'd have had my heart together, never ripped apart or hurled. In another universe, my dad and I would be childhood friends. We'd grow up together and play till the streetlights dim. I'd show him things he'd never been shown. I'd be his daughter and he never would have known. So again, you can kind of just see the complete switch versus unsaid and daughterly. And daughterly is still sad. There's still sadness throughout the grieving process. It's almost been 2.5 years. Today is actually 2 years and 5 months, which is super ironic that I got the opportunity to do this on his anniversary, like monthly. And I would say, honestly, overall, the biggest switch I had was, for me, finding my faith. I told y'all that, but it's finding my faith. It was finding me. It was learning to have a hobby and learning to breathe and not dwell. Because once you dwell, everything is just so much pressure. And I feel like poetry, it did save my life. I wouldn't have ever been able to understand what I went through. And I wouldn't have ever been able to reflect on it. But yeah, I'm really grateful. That's kind of all I have. I just kind of blanked out just now. But I really appreciate you guys coming. I actually didn't think anybody would come. I scheduled today so baseball and softball could come. And in like a day, it all just like flip switch.
And so thank you
Yeah.
for doing it. Because I asked her this morning, I said, do you want to go ahead? And she said, oh yeah, I'm ready.
And like, I know like teachers brought like their students and everything. And I know some of y'all might not actually be interested in poetry, but I still do appreciate that y'all came. It means a lot overall. It does mean a lot. And I
want to take some questions. in case
yeah,
anybody
yeah,
has-
for sure. If anyone has any questions like about anything,
Especially about the writing process.
Yeah,
or,
for
you know.
sure.
No question, but I think this would be the most difficult. It says a lot about you that you're in front of your peers, opening up like this.
Yeah, it was kind of hard. My hands are like.
That's gotta be hard.
Well,
But,
it's discussing something that's very difficult. to talk
Yeah.
about.
I agree. You can ask Mr. Burt. I'm pretty good at speeches. But yeah. No.
Speeches don't make you nervous. Bearing your soul
Yeah,
can make you
yeah. I wasn't nervous till like the last speech in his class because I actually tried. But we had a question right here.
Okay, it's more of the publishing process. I've thought about writing a book and putting it out there. What did you have to go through for that?
So originally I was posting my poetry on forums, and like there's one all poetry. It's pretty small. There's maybe about a few thousand users on it, and that's small for social media. But the biggest thing I think is just putting yourself out there more or less, and do these little forums and get a little feedback from people you don't know. Like I had 3 or 4 literature professors commenting on my stuff consistently. They're like, hey, this is nice, but then there's also criticism and you have to be ready for that. But for me, I published this through Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, and it was relatively easy. The marketing process is probably the hardest thing. But once you figure out the formatting and once you figure out the margins and just like this little tiny specifics, you'll be okay. It'll all work out.
Okay.
Any other?
How long did the average you take to write the poem?
Like per poem or the whole book?
Like per poem, like average, like just thinking.
I never really, this is weird, I never really plotted anything. When I talk about my poetry, normally, like when I'm just like one-on-one, I'm like, yeah, so the narrator literally like put this in here and that's insane, but like I act like I didn't write it. And for each poem, I just kind of got in like a mood. Like I would be really, really sad and I'm like, dude, I'm just gonna write this. Like, I don't even know what this is gonna come to, but I would sit down, I would write, and if I really liked a certain word or a certain line I put into the line, I'm like, okay, how can I rhyme this? How can I make this flow? And I feel like, I guess my conversational tone in my poetry is what really helped me overall. But I'd say per poem, like 10, 15 minutes. I never really dwelled too hard onto it, and if I didn't like it, I could just come back to it later when I thought about it, and I would just keep writing it. Anybody else?
So I imagine you wrote this in a very personal light, but like once you actually published it, did it change your relationship with what you've written?
Say that one more time.
Do you perceive the stuff you've written in a different way after publishing it?
In a different way.
Yeah, like
I don't think so. I feel like for me, this is kind of like a lot of my stuff was typed out and on this little form and then on this Google Doc and then on this thing. And I feel like for me, I look at it now as a lot more personal than anything. Because now I know people are going to see it and like, I didn't think I could actually help people. I didn't think my story was anything like crazy, but now like hearing people say something about it and they're like, hey, this really made me feel less alone, this made me feel less invisible. Now I look at it and I'm like, okay, I not only helped myself, but I helped at least one other person. So I feel like for me, I'm just kind of looking at my little public journal and I'm just slowly adding to it. But, anything else?
Thank you, Laney. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you guys.